Dad transferred the lease to me. You just work here now. My brother said that in my bakery doorway on opening day, dangling a key ring that used to be mine. He'd changed every lock overnight. My father had signed the paperwork 3 days earlier, handing over a $385,000 business I spent 4 years building from a rented kitchen table. I didn't cry. I sat in my car, both hands flat on the steering wheel, and pulled a folder from under the passenger seat. One document, a health inspection report filed 6 weeks earlier and never withdrawn. One call. By the time my brother poured his first coffee behind my counter, the inspector was already in the lot. When the closure notice hit the front door, 14 vendors watched. 3 never came back. What my father said in that parking lot cost them both the one person holding everything together, and they never saw me leave. Before I go on, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story speaks to you. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Now let me take you back to the night my father looked across my prep counter and said, "I always planned to give this to him." For the last 4 years, my life has been measured in grams of flour and the hum of a refrigerator. I started at 25 with a used stand mixer and a rented kitchen table that wobbled every time I needed dough. Back then, my dad, Gerald, used to watch me from the doorway of the kitchen. He'd tell me I had a nice little hobby, while I was processing 3 dozen orders for local cafes before sunrise. He never offered to help with the dishes, but he liked to tell his friends at the golf club that his daughter was an entrepreneur. By the time I hit 29, that hobby had turned into a $385,000 brick-and-mortar reality. We were 6 days away from the grand opening of Maya's Hearth, and I was living in the storefront. I had a cot in the back office because I didn't want to waste 40 minutes driving home when I could be proofing sourdough. My hands were permanently dry from the flour, and I had a burn on my left forearm from a tray rack that I didn't even have time to bandage properly. The hierarchy in our family has always been a quiet, solid thing. My father built a successful construction firm, and the rule was simple: men build the world and women decorate it. My brother, Ryan, is 3 years younger than me. He spent his 20s finding himself, which usually involved my father's credit card and a series of failed luxury car vlogs. But in my father's eyes, Ryan was the heir to the family legacy. I was just the workhorse. Last Tuesday, I was standing on a ladder, wiping down the industrial vents when Ryan walked in. He wasn't wearing an apron. He was wearing a slim-cut Italian suit that cost more than my first 3 ovens combined. He spent 20 minutes taking selfies in front of the custom marble counter I'd spent 6 months saving for. "The lighting in here is incredible, Maya," he said, checking his reflection in the glass of the pastry case. "We're really going to crush the lifestyle branding on this." "We?" I asked, not looking down from the vent. "I didn't know you were planning on waking up at 4:00 a.m. to start the ovens, Ryan." He just laughed. "I'm the big picture guy, sis. You handle the chemistry, I handle the culture." My father walked in right behind him, beaming. He didn't look at the vents I'd been scrubbing for 2 hours. He didn't look at the floor I'd waxed until my knees bled. He went straight to Ryan and clapped him on the shoulder. "Look at this place," Dad said. "A real Johansson family asset." "I always knew you had the head for this, Ryan. You've really guided the vision for this expansion." Ryan hadn't even seen the floor plans until the drywall was up. He didn't know the difference between a convection oven and a proofer. But I stayed silent. I told myself it didn't matter what they said, as long as the work was mine. Because my credit was thin when I started, my father had co-signed the commercial lease. It was a bridge I needed at the time. I had paid every single cent of the rent, the equipment loans, and the build-out costs from my own revenue. The plan was always for the lease to be transferred into my LLC during opening week. It was just a formality, or so I thought. The only person who seemed to see the actual work was Elias. He's 60, with hands like sandpaper and a warehouse full of the best coffee beans in the state. He's been my lead vendor since the kitchen table days. He showed up that afternoon with 30 bags of test espresso. He found me in the back, hauling 50-pound sacks of flour into the pantry because the delivery driver had a bad back and I didn't want to wait. Ryan was out front, practicing his manager's handshake in the mirror. Elias watched me drop the third sack. He didn't say anything for a minute. He just reached out, took the fourth sack from the stack, and carried it into the pantry for me. "You're doing the heavy lifting again, Maya," he said. His voice was low, like the sound of a slow-turning millstone. "It's just part of the job, Elias," I said, wiping the sweat from my forehead with my shoulder. He pulled a clipboard from his vest. "I'm not charging you for this first batch of espresso. Consider it a gift for the house." "I can't do that," I started, reaching for my checkbook. "Everything has to stay on the books." Elias stepped forward and tapped my flour-covered shoulder. He didn't look at the suit out front, he looked at me. "I'm not investing in a building, Maya. I'm investing in the hardest worker I know. Keep your money for the payroll." For a second, the tightness in my chest loosened. Someone saw me. Someone knew who was actually holding the walls up. That feeling lasted until 8:00 p.m. that night. My father called. He didn't ask how the final inspections went. He didn't ask if I'd eaten. "Mandatory family meeting at the shop tonight," he said. "Wear something decent. We're finalizing the paperwork." I thought it was finally happening. I thought I was finally going to see my name on the lease of the business I'd built from nothing. I went to the back office, washed the flour off my face, and waited. I had no idea that while I was scrubbing vents, they had already been to the lawyer's office. The family meeting didn't happen in the back office. My father led us out to the main floor. Under the warm glow of the pendant lights, I had stayed up until 3:00 a.m. installing 2 weeks prior. He leaned against the marble pastry case, his hands tucked into his pockets like he already owned the air in the room. Ryan was standing next to the espresso machines, tracing the chrome with a finger, looking like he was posing for a magazine cover. "Maya," my father started, his voice that specific pitch of calm he uses when he's about to move a mountain. "I've spent a lot of time looking at the numbers for this expansion. This isn't a kitchen table hustle anymore. This is a $500,000 operation. It requires a different kind of leadership." I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. "The numbers are fine, Dad. The pre-orders for the first month alone cover the equipment overhead. I showed you the spreadsheet." "Spreadsheets are one thing," he said, waving a hand as if dismissing a fly. "Execution is another. Ryan has the vision for the brand. He understands the social side, the scaling, the real business of it. So I've made a decision. To protect the family investment, the new lease has been finalized. It's under Ryan's name. He's the owner-manager. You'll be the head baker." The room seemed to tilt. I looked at Ryan. He wouldn't meet my eye. He was too busy adjusting the steam wand on a machine he didn't know how to turn on. "I built this," I said. My voice sounded thin, like it was coming from someone else's throat. "I paid every rent check for 4 years. I designed the logo. I developed every recipe in that vault. You just co-signed the paper because the bank wouldn't look at a 25-year-old woman." "And as the co-signer, I made the call," my father snapped. The calm was gone. "I always planned to give this to him, Maya. You're a great baker, you really are. You're the best in the county, but Ryan has the head for scaling a real business. You'd get bogged down in the flour and lose the forest for the trees. This way you get to do what you love, and he handles the heavy lifting." "The heavy lifting?" I looked at my hands. They were calloused and scarred. Ryan's hands were manicured. "He doesn't even know our overhead on butter." He'll learn, Dad said, and you'll be there to help him. You'll still get a paycheck, Maya. A good one, probably more than you were taking as a draw before. He was talking to me like I was a disgruntled employee asking for a weekend off, not the person who had birthed this brand from a sack of grain. He was handing my life's work to a man who thought sourdough was just a flavor of chips. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My heart was thumping against my ribs. I had a vendor portal where I tracked every gram of inventory and every dollar of projected revenue. I needed to show him the contracts I'd personally negotiated, contracts that were tied to me. I tapped the app icon. The login screen appeared. I typed in my password, invalid credentials. I tried again, slower this time. MAYABAKES2026. Invalid credentials. I looked up at Ryan. He finally looked at me, a small, smug smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. I had the IT guy from the firm sync all the accounts to my phone this afternoon, Ryan said smoothly. We needed to unify the digital footprint under the new management structure. It's just cleaner this way. He had locked me out of my own data. 4 years of customer emails, proprietary scaling math, and vendor history gone with a single password reset. I wasn't just being sidelined, I was being erased from the system I had built. I paid for those machines, I whispered, pointing to the espresso station. I paid for the ovens. With money that came through a lease I backed, my father reminded me. Technically, it's all company property, and Ryan is the company now. That was the first real damage. It wasn't just a bruised ego or a family spat. It was a calculated seizure of every asset I owned. I stood in the middle of my own shop and realized I was a guest. I drove to my parents' house at 10:00 p.m., my knuckles white against the steering wheel. I didn't call ahead. I walked through the front door using the key I'd had since I was 16 and found them in the living room. My mother was folding laundry, and my father was nursing a scotch, looking at a catalog for commercial signage. You have to reverse it, Dad, I said, standing in the center of the rug. The lease, the accounts, all of it. You can't just hand 4 years of my life to Ryan because he's a Johansson and I'm just the baker. My mother didn't look up from a t-shirt. Maya, don't be hysterical. You're making a scene. A scene? He stole my business, I said. He secured the family legacy, my father corrected, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. You were going to run yourself into the ground, Maya. You're too emotional about the product. Ryan will keep the brand clean. You'll still get a paycheck. You should be thanking us for taking the administrative burden off your shoulders. Why do you have to make your brother's big moment all about you? I'm taking my recipes, I said, my voice shaking. The sourdough starter I've kept alive for 4 years, the spice ratios, the vendor contacts, they're mine. If I'm just an employee, I'm resigning, and I'm taking my intellectual property with me. My father set his glass down on the mahogany side table with a sharp clack. The room went very still. You aren't taking anything, he said. Every recipe you developed while using company equipment I financed, belongs to the company. If you walk out with so much as a handwritten note, I'll have a process server at your door by morning. Theft of company property is a felony, Maya. Don't test me. It's not your property, I whispered. The paperwork says otherwise, he replied. And just so we're clear on how this works moving forward, I've frozen your personal draw from the business account. Until the grand opening is successful and Ryan confirms you're being cooperative, your access to funds is suspended. We need to ensure the capital stays where it belongs. I felt a cold hollow open up in my chest. My personal savings were tied into the business. I had reinvested almost every profit check back into the new ovens and the marble counters. I had maybe $400 in a checking account they didn't see. My rent was due in 2 days. My car payment was due on Friday, He wasn't just taking my bakery. He was starving me out. He was using my own poverty, a poverty I accepted so the business could grow, as a leash to keep me in the kitchen, baking for the brother who had never held a flour sack in his life. "You're locking me out of my own money?" I asked. "I'm protecting the transition," he said, picking his glass back up. "Go home, get some sleep. You have 300 baguettes to prep for the soft launch on Thursday. Don't be late." I looked at my mother. She was meticulously matching socks. She wouldn't look at me. She wouldn't even acknowledge that her daughter was being stripped bare in front of her. To her, family harmony meant the men were happy and the women were quiet. I walked out of the house without another word. I didn't have the breath for it. I sat in my car in their driveway, the engine idling, and realized that I was completely alone. I had no business, no savings, and the people who were supposed to be my safety net had just used it to strangle me. That was the realization. I wasn't just a daughter. I was an asset they had finished depreciating. I sat in my car outside the dark bakery for 3 hours. The neon, Maya's Hearth sign I had spent 6 weeks worth of grocery money on was glowing a soft, warm amber above the door. It looked beautiful. It looked like a lie. 4 years. I had spent 4 years of my life in a state of permanent exhaustion. I had burnt hands, a chronic ache in my lower back, and a social life that consisted entirely of saying maybe next time to every friend I ever had. I had traded my 20s for a lease that didn't have my name on it and a father who viewed my sweat as a family dividend. At 11:30 p.m., a familiar silver SUV pulled into the lot. Ryan. He wasn't alone. 3 of his friends piled out of the car, laughing and shouting. I watched through my windshield as Ryan pulled out a key ring, my key ring, and dangled it in the air like a trophy. He unlocked the door I had paid for. He turned on the lights I had wired. He was showing off his new place to a group of guys who wouldn't know a sourdough starter from a bowl of paste. I was invisible. I was sitting 20 feet away in a beat-up sedan with $400 to my name, and they didn't even notice me. I wasn't the founder anymore. I wasn't even the baker. I was just the background noise to Ryan's new career as a restaurateur. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I didn't want to answer it. I didn't want to hear my mother's be reasonable voice or my father's business reality lecture. But it wasn't them. It was Elia's. "Your brother just called me," the text read. Asked how to initialize the espresso boilers because he has guests. I told him I don't provide tech support for people who don't know how to read a manual. I hung up. "You okay, Maya?" I stared at the screen, my eyes blurred. It was the first time in 12 hours anyone had asked me if I was okay without trying to tell me how I should feel. "I'm at the shop," I typed back, watching him show it off. "Go home," Elias replied instantly. "Sleep." The world looks different at 4:00 a.m. I reached into the glove box to find an aspirin. My head was thumping. As I moved a stack of old napkins and a tire pressure gauge, my hand brushed against a thick manila folder. I had stashed it there 6 weeks ago and completely forgotten about it in the rush of the build-out. I pulled it out. It was the health inspection report from the final walkthrough of the kitchen. I flipped it open to the second page. There it was. A big, red, conditional stamp. Conditional pass. Subject to Master Food Safety Certification 4492M, Maya Johansson. The inspector had only cleared the kitchen because I personally held the highest level of certification in the county. The report stated explicitly that the permit was tied to the presence of the certified individual on the lease and the operating license. Ryan wasn't certified. He didn't even have a basic food handler's card. I looked back at the bakery. Ryan was behind my counter, pouring what looked like my expensive reserve bourbon for his friends. He was leaning on the marble, smiling. He thought he had the castle. He didn't realize the ground it was built on was already starting to shift. I tucked the folder back into the passenger seat. I didn't go home. I sat there and watched him celebrate a victory he hadn't earned, holding the one document that could take it all away. That was the floor. I couldn't get any lower than this. The news of Ryan's promotion didn't just stay in the family living room. By the next morning, it had been polished into a story that painted me as a fragile liability and Ryan as the savior of the Johansson investment. The first text came from my Aunt Martha at 9:00 a.m. "So sorry to hear you couldn't handle the stress of the expansion, Maya. It's a lot for one person. Take this time to focus on your mental health and let your brother carry the load for a while." Family is everything. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. They weren't saying I had been robbed, they were saying I had collapsed. My father was a master of the concerned pivot. He wasn't a thief, he was a worried parent stepping in to prevent his daughter's inevitable burnout. By noon, I received an automated notification from the bank. The business account, the one I had built from a zero balance, was now officially under Ryan Johansson Enterprises. An hour later, an email arrived from our local bank manager, Mr. Henderson. I had sat in his office 6 times over 3 years, pleading for small equipment loans while he looked at my flour-stained jeans with skepticism. Now he was writing to Ryan, CCing me as if I were a courtesy contact. Glad to see the family is consolidating the management structure. I'm happy Ryan stepped in to save the investment and ensure a professional launch. The investment, not the recipes. Not the 80-hour weeks, just the money my father used to hold the door open. That evening was the Chamber of Commerce pre-opening mixer. It was supposed to be my night. I had planned to go in my best dress and finally be recognized as a business owner in this town. Instead, I drove there to collect my personal mail from the Chamber's cubby because I knew Ryan would accidentally throw it away if it arrived at the shop. I walked into the banquet hall, still wearing my work boots and a hoodie. The room didn't just go quiet, it shifted. It's a specific sound when 100 people stop talking at once and then slowly start again at a lower frequency. People who used to call me the bread queen and ask for my secret to a perfect crumb now offered me tight, pitying smiles. They looked at me the way you look at a car wreck, grateful it isn't you, but curious about the damage. I saw Ryan across the room. He was holding court by the bar, a gin and tonic in one hand, his other hand gesturing broadly as he spoke to the mayor. He was wearing that Italian suit again. It was a tough call, I heard Ryan's voice carry over the clink of glasses. Maya's a brilliant artisan, truly. But when we looked at the scale of the new storefront, we realized the operational demands were just. Well, they were beyond her. I had to step in to rescue the launch. It's about protecting the brand's future. The mayor nodded, looking impressed. Good on you, Ryan. Hard to tell family they aren't ready for the big leagues, but someone has to be the adult in the room. I stood by the mail slots, my hand trembling as I gripped a stack of envelopes. Nobody came over. Nobody asked my side. The lie had already been accepted as the floor plan of my new life. I was the emotional artist who couldn't handle the big leagues. I didn't stay for the drinks. I didn't even say hello. I turned around, walked back to my car, and sat in the dark for a long time. I reached over to the passenger seat and pulled out that manila folder. I turned on the dome light. I looked at the health inspection report again, specifically the section on certified manager requirements. The lie was fast, but the law was slow and heavy. Ryan was telling the whole town he was the adult in the room, but he didn't realize that in 48 hours, the room was going to be legally required to have an adult he'd just kicked out. I put the car in gear. I wasn't going home to cry. I was going to see Elia's. Elia's warehouse smelled like dark chocolate and burlap. It was the only place in town where I didn't feel like a ghost. I laid the manila folder on his scarred oak desk, right next to a half-empty mug of black coffee. I didn't say a word. I just pointed to the red conditional stamp and the clause regarding the Master Food Safety certification. Elias adjusted his glasses, leaning into the pool of light from his desk lamp. He read it once, then again. A slow, grim smile spread across his face, the kind of smile a man wears when he realizes he's holding the winning card in a rigged game. "Ryan doesn't have this, does he?" Elias asked. "Ryan thinks a health inspector is someone who checks if the napkins are folded," I said. "He has no idea that this kitchen only exists because my license is tied to that specific address. I did a 16-week remediation course last year because the previous tenant let the grease traps rot. The county won't let a burner be lit in that building without a master-certified manager on the lease." Elias leaned back, his chair creaking. "Since your father moved the lease to Ryan, your certification is legally detached from the property. The moment they open those doors for business, they are operating a high-risk facility without a valid permit." He didn't offer me pity. He didn't tell me it was going to be okay. He pushed a yellow legal pad toward me and handed me a pen. "We aren't going to fight them in a courtroom, Maya," he said. "Your father has more lawyers than you have flour sacks. We're going to fight them at the loading dock. Write down the name of every vendor you brought into that shop. Not the ones your dad knows, the ones who know you." I started writing. It was a list of 14 people. The egg farmer who delivered at 5:00 a.m. because I always had a hot croissant waiting for him. The dairy cooperative that gave me a volume discount because I never missed a payment. The spice importer who sourced my specific cinnamon from a single estate in Vietnam. "These people don't have contracts with Johansson Enterprises," Elias said, picking up his desk phone. "They have contracts with Maya's LLC, and I happen to know most of them have been wondering why Ryan Johansson is the one calling them today to bark orders about delivery times." For the next 2 hours, I sat in that warehouse and watched a veteran of the industry activate. Elias didn't yell. He just explained the situation to 14 different people. He told them that the owner they signed with was no longer on the lease. He told them the kitchen was about to be flagged as a hazard. By the time he hung up with the last vendor, a local berry farmer, the supply chain for Maya's hearth had been effectively severed. "They won't have so much as a pint of milk by Thursday morning," Elias said. Before I left, he walked me to my car. He reached into his pocket and handed me a small, heavy object. It was a spare key to his warehouse. "If you need a place to store your personal equipment, the North Bay is empty," he said. "I'm investing in the worker, Maya, remember that." I felt a lump in my throat that I had to swallow twice. "Thank you, Elias." "Don't thank me yet," he said. "Go home and send the email." I got into my car and opened my laptop, tethering it to my phone's hotspot. I drafted a formal notice to the county health department. It was short and clinical. I was officially withdrawing my Master Food Safety certification from the business license at my former address, effective immediately due to a change in ownership and my departure from the company. I hit send. That was the first time in 48 hours I felt like I could breathe. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was moving. The confirmation from the county health department came at 8:14 a.m. the following morning. I was sitting at my small kitchen table, the same one where I'd started the bakery 4 years ago, watching the steam rise from a chipped ceramic mug. The email was dry, clinical, and absolutely devastating to anyone who actually understood the industry. RE, Case 8821 FC, Notice of Permit Suspension. This office has received your withdrawal of master certification for the premises at 442 West Oak St. As there is no other certified manager currently listed on the active lease or business license, the facility's high-risk food service permit is hereby suspended effective immediately. Continued operation without a certified manager on site will result in immediate closure and administrative fines. I stared at the screen for a long time. It was real. The leverage wasn't a theory anymore, it was a live wire. In the world of commercial baking, people think the ovens are the heart of the business. They aren't. The paperwork is. You can have the best sourdough in the country, but if the county says your grease traps are a biohazard or your management isn't certified to handle raw dairy, you aren't a baker. You're just a person with an expensive hobby and a very large debt. I wasn't a daughter pleading for fairness anymore. I was a strategist. I didn't call my father to scream. I didn't text Ryan to tell him he was in trouble. I didn't do anything to stop them from making their own mistakes. I spent the morning moving my personal equipment, the small batch mixers, my custom proofing baskets, and my specialized decorating tools to Elia's warehouse. I worked in total silence, methodically packing every item I had bought with my own savings. When I drove past the bakery at noon, I saw Ryan's car in the lot. He was inside with a photographer, likely taking behind-the-scenes shots of himself looking busy for the grand opening announcement. He didn't know that every photo he took was documenting a facility that was now legally condemned. I met Elias at his loading dock at 2:00 p.m. He looked at the email on my phone and gave a single, sharp nod. "The inspector is a man named Miller," Elias said. "He's been around for 20 years. He doesn't care about family legacies or who played golf with the mayor. He cares about the temperature of the walk-in and the credentials on the wall. He already has the alert." "What about the vendors?" I asked. "Confirmed," Elias replied. "I spoke to the dairy cooperative and the flour mill. Since the lease transfer changed the legal entity of the business, their existing contracts with your LLC are void. Ryan tried to place an order this morning using your account number. They told him the account was frozen pending a credit check for the new owner. He hung up on them. He doesn't have a credit history for this business," I said. "He has no trade references." "Exactly," Elias said. "He's a ghost in the system. He's trying to run a $385,000 engine with no oil and no fuel." This was the part where my father's business acumen would fail him. He was used to the construction world, where you could bully subcontractors and move money around to hide mistakes. The food industry is different. It's daily, it's perishable. If the milk doesn't show up at 5:00 a.m., you don't have a business at 8:00 a.m. I wasn't reactive. I wasn't hurt. I was just waiting for the clock to run out. I realized then that I had already won the business back in my head. Now I just had to watch it fall out of their hands in the real world. It was the morning of the grand opening, and the air felt heavy with the smell of damp pavement and wood smoke. I parked my car in the back corner of the gravel lot across the street, far enough away that I wouldn't be noticed, but close enough to see the expression on my father's face when the world stopped working for him. By 7:00 a.m., the parking lot of Maya's Hearth was a hive of unearned confidence. My father was already out front, adjusting a massive red ribbon he draped across the door handles. He was wearing his best charcoal suit, the one he only wore for church and bank meetings. He looked like a man who had just won a war without firing a single shot. He was shaking hands with a local reporter, pointing up at my hand-painted sign as if he'd been the one who spent 3 days on a scaffold getting the gold leaf just right. Ryan was inside. I could see him through the floor-to-ceiling glass, pacing back and forth with a panicked energy. He kept checking his watch and looking toward the entrance of the lot. He was waiting for the 14 delivery trucks that usually arrived by 5:30. He didn't realize that the trucks weren't just late, they were gone. I watched him try to use the industrial espresso machine again. He pressed a button, waited, and then hit the side of the machine when nothing happened. He didn't know the boilers needed 20 minutes to prime, and he didn't know I had disconnected the remote water line as a safety precaution before I left. He looked like a child playing pilot in a cockpit he couldn't even reach the pedals of. At 8:30 a.m., a silver sedan pulled in, the county health department's official vehicle. Inspector Miller stepped out, holding a clipboard and a roll of heavy-duty adhesive tape. He didn't look at the ribbon. He didn't look at my father's outstretched hand. He walked straight to the front door, his eyes locked on the glass. My father's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then snapped back into place. I watched him say something, likely an invitation to come inside for a VIP tour. Miller didn't even break his stride. He pointed to the Maya's Hearth operating permit displayed in the window and then back to his clipboard. That's when Ryan walked out. He saw me sitting in my car across the street. He didn't look worried, he looked triumphant. He reached into his pocket, pulled out my key ring, and dangled it in the air, the metal glinting in the morning sun. "Dad transferred the lease to me, Maya," he shouted across the road, his voice carrying in the quiet morning air. "You just work here now, or you don't. I haven't decided if I'm keeping you on yet." He was so busy gloating that he didn't see Miller reaching into his bag. He didn't see the bright orange sticker the inspector was peeling. "I always planned to give this to him," my father's voice echoed in my head, the words he'd said in the parking lot weeks ago. He had planned for the inheritance, but he hadn't planned for the accountability. The vendors were sitting in a holding lot 3 miles away, waiting for my signal. The ovens were cold. And the man with the clipboard was currently sticking a closure notice directly over Ryan's reflection in the glass. I put my hands flat on the steering wheel and waited for the first truck to turn the corner. The silence in the parking lot was heavy. It was the kind of silence that happens right before a storm breaks. 14 vendor trucks were lined up like a blockade, their engines idling in a low, rhythmic growl that drowned out the upbeat pop music Ryan had playing through the outdoor speakers. My father was the first to move. He walked toward Inspector Miller, his chest puffed out, his contractor voice booming. This was the voice he used to intimidate site foremen and city clerks. "Now hold on a minute, Miller," my father said, reaching for the orange notice. "There's been a misunderstanding. This is a Johansson property. I co-signed the lease myself. We've poured nearly $400,000 into this build-out. You can't just slap a sticker on the door because of a clerical update." Miller didn't flinch. He didn't even look up from his clipboard. "It's not a clerical update, Gerald. It's a violation of the county health code. You're operating a high-priority food facility without a master-certified manager on the permit. That makes this kitchen an unmitigated public hazard. If you open those doors, I'm calling the sheriff to clear the building." "I'm the manager," Ryan shouted, stepping forward. He was sweating now, the moisture staining the collar of his expensive suit. "I own the LLC. I have the lease. You can't shut me down for a piece of paper." "It's not just a piece of paper, son," Miller said, finally looking at him. "It's 16 weeks of specialized training in foodborne illness, sanitation, and chemical management. Without that certification, the one your sister holds, this building is just a very expensive warehouse for rotting dairy." The crowd of guests and local reporters started to murmur. I saw the mayor step back, his face reddening. He looked at his aide and whispered something. A moment later, they were walking toward their car. They didn't want to be in the photo when the grand opening turned into a police-escorted closure. Ryan looked over at me. He was trembling. "Maya, tell him you're the baker. Tell him you're on the staff." I didn't roll down my window. I just looked at him. My father turned his fury on the trucks. He marched over to the lead vehicle, Elia's delivery van. He pounded on the door. "Elia's." Unload the damn beans. I don't care what the inspector says. I'm paying you to deliver, so deliver. Elias opened his door and stepped out slowly. He stood a head taller than my father, and he didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. He looked at the crowd, then at the inspector, then back at my father. "My contract isn't with you, Gerald," Elias said. His voice carried easily across the lot. "My contract is with the founder of the bakery. I sign agreements with people who know how to run a kitchen, not people who steal them. Maya's LLC is the one on my books, and since she's not on this lease, I have no legal obligation to give you so much as a coffee stir." "I'll sue you," my father screamed. "I'll blackball your warehouse from every commercial project in the county." "Go ahead," Elias said calmly, "but you'll be doing it from an empty shop." He walked to the back of his van, pulled out a small cedarwood box, and walked across the street toward my car. The crowd watched in total silence. This was my private recipe box, the one with the handwritten ratios for the sourdough and the spice blends my grandmother had taught me. Elias had smuggled it out the night before. He handed it through my window. "The trucks are staying right here, Maya," Elias whispered. "Nobody goes in and nothing comes out." That was the moment the first defection happened. Sarah, the lead barista I had hired and trained for 6 months, walked out of the bakery front door. She was wearing her new apron with the Maya's Hearth logo. She looked at Ryan, who was still trying to argue with Miller, then she looked at me. She reached behind her back, untied the apron, and dropped it on the sidewalk. "I'm not working for someone who doesn't know how to prime a boiler, Ryan," she said. "And I'm definitely not working for someone who treats his own sister like an unpaid intern." 2 other kitchen staffers followed her. They didn't say anything. They just walked to the edge of the lot and stood by the vendor trucks. My father was losing it. He grabbed the orange closure notice and tried to rip it off the glass. "This is my building. I pay the taxes. I'm opening this door." "Gerald, don't," Miller warned, reaching for his radio. My father ripped the paper. He threw the shredded orange pieces into the air and grabbed the door handle, pulling it open. "Get inside, Ryan. Start the ovens." But Ryan didn't move. He was looking at the street. A second county vehicle had just pulled in. This one had code enforcement on the side. They weren't there for a friendly chat. Because my father had physically interfered with a health department posting and was attempting to operate a condemned facility, they were there to seize the operating license permanently. My father had just turned a 30-day suspension into a permanent blacklisting of that address. He had destroyed the value of the property in 30 seconds of ego. I put my car in drive. I didn't need to see the rest. I saw the reporter's camera flash as they took a picture of my father being cornered by 2 officers. I saw Ryan sitting on the curb, his head in his hands, finally realizing that a suit doesn't make a businessman. I turned the corner and didn't look back. I had my recipes in the passenger seat and 14 trucks of supplies waiting for my signal. I wasn't the emotional baker anymore. I was the only one left with a future. The $385,000 bakery didn't open that day. It didn't open the next week, either. Because my father had physically interfered with a government official, and Ryan had no legal standing to operate the equipment, the landlord moved to evict them within 90 days. The Johansson legacy turned into a boarded-up storefront with a stack of legal summonses taped to the glass. My father is currently facing 6 figures in commercial debt and a lawsuit from the original property owner for devaluing the lease. Ryan moved back into my parents' basement. He doesn't post lifestyle vlogs anymore. I didn't go back to ask for an apology. I didn't wait for a phone call that would never come. 2 weeks after the closure, I signed a lease on a small, narrow space 3 blocks away from the town square. It used to be a dry cleaner's. It's a third of the size of the other place, but the windows face the sunrise and the floors are solid oak. I didn't have $385,000. I had my 14 vendors, my master certification, and my grandfather's cedar recipe box. Opening morning at the new shop was quiet. There was no red ribbon. There were no reporters or mayors. At 5:00 a.m., Elia's truck pulled into the alley. He didn't wait for me to ask. He just started unloading the espresso beans. Sarah and the two other girls who walked out with me were already inside, wearing plain black aprons and humming along to the radio. When I opened the door at 7:00 a.m., Elias was the first person in line. I handed him a warm cardamom bun and a double shot of espresso. "On the house?" he asked, reaching for his wallet. "No," I said, leaning against the counter. "On the owner." I reached into my pocket and felt the weight of the brass key. It didn't belong to a family trust. It wasn't a gift from a father who wanted a throne for his son. It was mine. The silence in the shop was different now. It wasn't the silence of being ignored. It was the silence of a foundation that was finally level. I looked out the window and saw the morning sun hitting the brickwork across the street. The orange closure notice is still peeling off the glass of the old bakery, right next to a faded, grand opening poster with Ryan's face on it. People walk past it every day. They don't look at the name on the sign anymore. They just follow the smell of the bread down the street to my door. I'm Maya Johansson. I'm a baker. And for the first time in my life, I'm not working for a paycheck, I'm working for myself. If your family stole the business you built with your own hands, would you have warned them about the inspection, or would you have let the health department lock the doors? Drop a comment below and let me know what you would have done in my shoes. If this story spoke to you, make sure to check out the link in the description about a woman who let her mother plan her entire wedding, only to realize the groom wasn't invited. You won't want to miss that one. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.